One Girl for All the Men, a story that took place on the Japanese island of Anatahan in 1944. Greetings. Today, we are going to talk about a case that happened at the end of the Second World War. It is about a young girl who found herself on one of the Japanese islands with 36 men. Who is Higa Katsuko, and under what circumstances she became the queen of the island, Anatahan? It is true that all the islanders shared one representative of the female sex up to the fierce fights. How events developed far from civilization, when the Japanese found the wreckage of an American warplane. Whether the girl was really saved by the US Army, which sailed past the island on a ship. Be sure to watch the video to the very end. It will be very interesting. The era of the Japanese conquest of the islands. As you probably already know, the territory of Japan is located entirely on islands. That is why the Japanese repeatedly developed new lands, especially during the Second World War. This is primarily due to the search for valuable resources for the population of the country. Since such actions took place in wartime, it was also necessary to occupy certain territories. Do you know anything about Anatahan? This small island of about 40 square kilometers is part of the Mariana Archipelago. It is also home to a volcano. Finally, Anatahan is located in the Pacific Ocean and belongs to the land of the rising sun. But at the beginning of the last century, it was here that the Japanese organized coconut plantations. The situation changed dramatically during the war years. It became unsafe to be on the island of Anatahan. But it was here that a Japanese woman named Higa Katsuko was brought here. Later, she was joined by 32 Japanese sailors. How developed after this event further? Let's deal with it in order. Higa Katsuko. So, Higa Katsuko is a girl from Japan who during the Second World War worked as a waitress. She herself was originally from Okinawa. In 1944, as you know, Japan was defeated time after time in battles with the Americans. That's why Higa Katsuko hoped for the support of her own brother, as well as a young man. The latter turned out to be Higu Kikuichiro, who was also born and raised in Okinawa. Subsequently, the couple ended up just on that very Anatahan. On top of that, Katsuko and Higu were joined by the latter's boss. The man's name was Masami Kusakabe. All three were sent to the island for one purpose only: to control the natives, who at that time were growing coconuts on the plantations. But because of the increasingly fierce fighting, it was decided to leave the island. To do so, Kikuichiro left Anatahan and went to get help. Unfortunately, the man came under fire from the American army and therefore could not return back. During her few months on the island, Higa Katsuko seemed to fall in love with Kusakabe, her young man's superior. A loving relationship developed between them, especially since the man reciprocated. Then, Japanese sailors arrived at Anatahan, who miraculously survived after being shelled by American soldiers. At first, Higa Katsuko rejoiced at their arrival. But the happiness did not last long. Queen of the island and serious competition among men. Who would have thought that between people of the same nationality can be a real rivalry? And it wasn't about food, water, and other such resources. There was plenty of that on Anatahan. But the struggle for the one woman on the island did take place. At first, there was no sign of trouble. More than 30 people stuck together and supported each other during a difficult time for the country. Japanese sailors were even trained to make hot drinks from coconuts. The main activities on the island were hunting and working on the available plantations. Then all islanders began to unite in one common group to resist any troubles far from civilization. And the Japanese also noticed one important detail: the only woman on the island. Higa Katsuko went from being a simple Japanese woman to the queen of Anatahan. A sad event for the Japanese occurred a year after peaceful life on the island. The thing is that sailors found leaflets on the shore. They said that Japan had lost the war to the United States. No one believed this, and therefore the islanders took the information as a usual plot of America against the land of the rising sun. At that moment, out of frustration and hopelessness, the sailors became furious. They began to look at Higu Katsuko more and more often. Everyone wanted to fulfill all their desires at the sight of the only woman they could find. The real competition began, which soon began to lead to tragic consequences. Masami Kusakabe repeatedly advised Katsuko not to provoke men and always wear clothes. But the latter did not save. Over time, it wore out, and the demonstration of a woman's body only increased the attention of Japanese sailors. A new trophy! In the late summer of 1946, the islanders accidentally stumbled upon the wreckage of a US warplane, a B-29 bomber. On the one hand, such a trophy turned out to be valuable. The construction of the aircraft was used to make dishes and clothes. Some parts were recycled and thereby built shelters from the rain. But on the other side, weapons and ammunition for them fell into the hands of the Japanese. Since some of the sailors had military experience, they immediately prepared the found guns in readiness for action. The guns and ammunition came under the control of two men, Tanaka and Matsuo. These men were a kind of authority on the island of Anatahan, and therefore they established unlimited power among all the other islanders. As we mentioned earlier, because of the rivalry for the queen of the island, tragic events began to happen. This was directly related to the fact that Tanaka and Matsuo had small arms. In the following days, people began to disappear time after time, although all the islanders fully understood the reasons for what was happening. Tanaka and Matsuo were simply getting rid of unwanted competitors. Masami Kusakabe, who had once fallen in love with Higu Katsuko and never left her side. But Tanaka and Matsuo soon had a serious fight. The reason for this is simple. The men did not share Katsuko between them. In the end, Matsuo defeated his rival, and soon he was found in the middle of the ocean. The islanders were puzzled by this tragedy. After all, the Japanese was an excellent swimmer and therefore could not so easily go into the next world. Soon, everyone guessed that the fight was on. The perpetrators of the tragedy were found, and they turned out to be two Japanese soldiers. They took over the guns, and again, everything went according to the well-known scenario. The Japanese got rid of each other, and the power passed to the next. Serious rivalry continued until the number of islanders reached the mark of 24. Meanwhile, there was only one girl left on Anatahan. The captain of the Japanese sailors finally acted wisely. He offered Hige Katsuko herself to choose her own life partner. But even such a decision did not help. All the applicants for the role of groom did not survive. Rescue from the island. After incessant tragedies, the islanders realized that everything was happening because of the island's queen. At one of the meetings, the Japanese made a serious decision: to eliminate Katsuko. Only one of them told the girl a glimpse of what awaited her. For Higa's safety, Katsuko left the ill-fated Anatahan once and for all. According to one version, she was rescued by the US Army on a ship passing near the island. In another version, Katsuko was taken away by a Japanese man with ties to America. After the war, the girl returned to Okinawa, married, and had 2 children. But the islanders left Anatahan after they were convinced that World War II was over. Conclusion. Thus, the story of Hige Katsuko is of general interest even today. Many people have a hard time understanding how one girl was on an island with 32 men. Nevertheless, Hige Katsuko managed to avoid the sad consequences that took place on Anatahan in 1944-1945.